How would it be if you were born the wrong gender? And how would it be if you lived in Malaysia?
They do the Asian parent thing where they deny anything that exists outside of their own worldview. Like, I've read a lot of stories from like Western backgrounds. They're like, oh, cut off this toxic relationship. But for us, in our context, it's not that simple. There's so many things that are intertwined in our family dynamics that cutting off your parents isn't a thing.
I tell you, there was a whole bunch of documents. After going the whole round, going everywhere to get every single thing, like a wild goose chase, then the next officer behind the table told me, no, we cannot change the gender. So it was like, you should have told me in the first place. And then at this point in my life also, I really want to say, okay, I don't want it anymore.
Welcome to Audio Stories, a two-booknet stalking special edition show in collaboration with Empower Malaysia. We bring you voices of marginalized communities in Malaysia by questioning how would it be to walk in their shoes. In this episode, you will be listening to a transgender experience. Don't miss our other episodes featuring Orang Asli, refugees, and foreign spouses' voices.
But first, a story. How would it be if you discovered that a long-lost grandfather is in fact a grandmother? This is what happened to Sarah in this exclusive excerpt from Julya Wi's upcoming book, Transma and Me.
Transma and Me by Julya Oui, read by Tina Isaacs. Seeing her sitting there makes me a little nervous. I have mixed feelings. I don't know how to welcome her into my world, and I don't know what her world is like for the new generation. I could have never imagined my granddaughter coming to find me after all these years. I was so sure I was going to leave this earth without any connections to the outside world. I'd already accepted the fact that I was doing it alone on this last leg of my journey, and I was contented. Now, knowing that Sarah exists changes everything. But I mustn't get it in over my head though. She may just be visiting or passing through to satiate the teenagers' curiosity. I may never see her again after this. That is the truth I have to embrace. Here I am ranting again about something I have no business ranting about while making her uncomfortable. Do you know how your great-grandparents look like? I decide to open our conversation with something tangible and neutral. We have a photograph of them, but it's quite old and faded. I never really bothered to look at it, she says without conviction. I stand up, walk to the cupboard, and rummage through the drawer to dig out the one and only photo album I keep. I got rid of the photographs of me before my transition and only keep the newer ones that I like, especially those with my parents and some friends. Since I'm living alone, I make sure everything that I do not want anyone else to see are destroyed, besides my not wanting to remember those agonizing days and nights of self-denial. I sit beside her on the sofa and rest the photo album on my lap. It must seem peculiar for her, since everyone views photographs on their social media these days. But I don't know any other way to re-establish our relationship, if that is what she wants to do in the first place. I flip the album to the page where my late parents are, and I look at them wistfully. These are your great-grandparents. People look so serious those days. She touches the plastic film gently to trace the contours of the old photograph, but her mind is elsewhere. If you had come about 5 years earlier, you would have had a chance to meet them. If I had only known. That remark twists knots in my stomach and bleed my heart out. I pat her hand and tell her softly, "At least you're here now." She does not draw away. It is a good sign that she is okay to be associated with me. All those years of experience revealed to me the human condition that I dread to recall. Knowing that someone is uncomfortable with my presence is as terrifying as knowing that they expect something out of me. I'm all right without human contact ever since I sequestered myself in this little corner of the world. But now, touching my granddaughter's hand brings back memories of a time when I actually appreciated another person's company. Grandma, is it okay if I ask you something? Of course, Sarah. Even if it was something about being a transgender. I don't mind, but I believe there's no need for an article before the noun. Huh? I mean, you don't need to put an before transgender. Oh, I didn't know that. Will you be offended if I ask you some personal questions? No, I'm okay. When did you realize you were transgender? I've always known that I was different, even when I was very young. But it was at the age of 11 that I knew I had to do something about it. Did you confide in anyone? No, I wanted to, but back then it was not something you talk about freely. Besides, this is a very transphobic town, and coming out transgender would have been catastrophic. I was very afraid to identify as transgender, so I kept it to myself for as long as I could. It was only years later in my early teens that I shared my secret with 2 gay friends. How was it for you? Was it hard to be who you are? The hardest part of being different is self-denial. All my life, I was told anything other than the norm of being male or female was considered an abomination. I used to think my life was a tragedy. I believed I had to carry the world on my shoulders because of who I was, caught between 2 worlds which I could not embrace or be contented with. My mother didn't like seeing me being effeminate, so she tried her best to make a man out of me. She made me work with my father, who was a construction worker, to help him carry cement bags, bricks, leftover materials, and any hard work under the sun that could make a man a man. But that was not the hardest thing I had to go through. Not accepted by my own family was one thing, but not accepting myself was the worst. I'm sorry to hear that, Grandma. Don't be. Times were different then. What about school? Did you have any trouble in school? Not at all. My schoolmates didn't persecute me for being who I was, although I've never confirmed nor denied anything in front of them. The most they did was tease me as though I was a girl, but not in a bad way. It was the teachers who made it hard for me. Some of them anyway. Other than that, school was a wonderful time for me. When did you decide to go through surgery? How did you know it was right for you? I wasn't like any other kid growing up. I started questioning about my existence ever since I could understand it. I wanted to know why I was created, why I existed, what was the reason for my being, and what was it that made me, me. It became an obsession to want to understand myself so much. I spent most of my impressionable years looking for answers. I used to go to the streams and lay on the boulder to look at the treetops and sky, to see if I could fathom even a small part of this idea of me against the whole universe. It even came to a point when I questioned God and asked him why he made me this way. What was the purpose? And why me in particular? Did you find any answers, Grandma? Not immediately. It took me years of deep soul-searching and experiencing life with its ups and downs before I actually found myself. I was always afraid of the truth. To be able to look at myself in the mirror and see me for who I am was one of the hardest decisions I had to make. I could do without the label, but that was the only one that described me. Not anymore. Yes, I'm glad times have changed. It does not help to associate someone with a derogatory label that implicates mental disorder, abomination, and perversion. And how the tables have turned for those who implicated them. It was hard enough to go on with self-renouncing and self-loathing, but I cared too much about what other people think. I was always looking for approval, but from all the wrong places and from all the wrong people. It drove me to become suicidal. Did you, Grandma? Once. I took a cocktail of insecticide and medication. But the only thing I got from it was a horrible stomach upset. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, Grandma. It's okay, Sarah. I survived. I didn't attempt it again, but that thought never left my mind for a long time. Every now and then it came back. I was at the end of my ropes again in my late 30s, so I gave myself an ultimatum. It was time to do or die. So I did. It's so heartbreaking and inspiring at the same time. With nothing to lose, I decided to go online to look for a surgeon in Bangkok. Before the internet, nobody knew how to help me. I called up suicide prevention centers, talked to some NGOs, had sessions with a psychiatrist, and confided in friends, but no one could advise me on the next step. So, when I found the hospital in Bangkok and they told me to get my documents together, I gathered everything so quickly as I could within the next few months. I set the date, packed my bags, flew there with a friend, and went for my surgery. All my life, I was wandering in circles looking for a way out. And quite unexpectedly, I just couldn't believe it was that easy to make that life-changing decision. Wow, that is really something to cheer about. I felt like a lifetime of burden was lifted off my shoulders. The tragedy I always thought my life was had become an adventure. The agony I had to endure because of who I am was not real anymore. My life had meaning now, and there was something to look forward to in my every waking moment. For the first time, I could express myself and be true to myself. When I was wheeled out of the operation theatre, I looked frightful, with ointment around my eyes, bandages in my crotch, around my chest and neck, and I could hardly keep awake. My friends said I looked like I was in great pain, but I wasn't. Even if I was, I wouldn't have minded it. Although it did ache a little here and there, but other than that, I was fine. That was the highest point in my life where I thought everything was going to be smooth sailing from then on. Wasn't it? I don't want to overwhelm you with my story, Sarah. Perhaps we could continue tomorrow if you like? But I'm not tired yet. Can you tell me more, please? I will. Tonight is your first night here. You just arrived. Let's not rush into things. You may not be tired, but I am. I'm not young anymore like you. What time is it? Almost 11. Only? I don't even sleep at 1 in KL. But I do feel a little sleepy though. Why is that? Fresh air, peace and quiet, the calmness, it will do that to you. But I want to know more. Tomorrow. Are you a morning person? I can try to be. I cycle out every morning for exercise, followed by breakfast and errands. Do you want to go with me? Yes, that would be nice. Is Indian breakfast fine with you? Definitely. Help yourself to anything in the house and make yourself at home. Okay, Grandma. I have to tuck my furry family in before I go to bed. You can stay up and watch a movie if you like. They're all in the study, but I don't know if they are to your taste. They're very old movies. Yeah, I'll check them out later. Do you want anything to eat or drink? No thanks, Grandma. I'm stuffed with the food you laid out for dinner. Okay, good night, Sarah. I'm really glad you came. I'm really glad I came too. How can I go to sleep now? How can I wait for tomorrow? It's outrageous, sinful even to call it the night. But my eyes deceive me, shutting down on me when Grandma was sharing with me an incredible story of her life. I feel so unaccomplished compared to her. Will I have a life-changing experience? I wanted so much to embrace her, but me and my Asian upbringing, my Chinese upbringing that don't encourage physical intimacy, not even a verbal one. I don't think I've ever held my parents after I turned 8. So much for being a close-knit family. I don't think I've ever felt what it's like to be home. My parents were always around, but we lived in our own time zone. We have everything city folks have, but after a while, the novelty runs out. Just like my social media phase, my smartphone phase, my music phase, my dating phase, my everything phase, when I hit the wall of boredom. The only one thing that keeps me interested are old books, old songs, old movies, things that make sense to me. According to some site on the internet, I have an old soul. I didn't know souls had an age. Now, looking at Grandma, I'm beginning to understand why. Somehow, deep down inside, I know I'm missing something in my life, and it is her. I switch off the lights to look at the stars through the windows. I've never seen anything like this before. Since street lights are always competing with the night sky for attention in the city. Living in a condo among other condos, I don't even get a clear view of the sky. For someone who doesn't know much about astronomy, I'm suddenly quite keen to discover more about the celestial bodies up in the sky. The one and only constellation I know is Orion. I've heard it somewhere or seen it mentioned in some movies, and it's the easiest to remember. There he is, right outside my window, as if watching over me. It's such a good feeling, and I never want this night to end, but I can hardly keep my eyes open. I like Grandma's house with barely any furniture around. It's so minimalist. In the city, it is difficult to get from one spot to another without having to avoid obstructions. A therapeutic chair here, a display cabinet there, a side table here, an antique vase there, and possessions that seem more out of place than they are worth keeping. Now I am sleeping on a coconut husk mattress on a metal bed with a small cupboard at the corner of the wall. That is all there is, and it is enough. I wonder where Grandma hides all her junk. I feel like I could finally breathe. I haven't even thought about checking my social media, updating them and seeing what everyone else I know is up to. I could say I almost don't miss it at all. The lull of the nocturnal sounds draw me deeper and deeper into slumber, but I keep trying to prolong the inevitable. I don't want to wake up the next day to find out it was all just a dream. Please let this be real. I have never felt so connected to a complete stranger who also happens to be my grandmother. Now, how great is that?
Transma and Me is set in Taiping and explores what it means to rekindle a lost connection. But at its heart, it is a story about family. Oh, and this is such a lovely story. I am so invested now in Sarah and her Transma and hopelessly miss my own hometown of Ipoh. It's just been so long. How about you, Dinah?
What really got me was the way the grandmother, she's basically accepted that she'd be cut off from her family forever. She didn't even know the existence of her granddaughter. And I think there's such visceral pain at the separation. She's experienced this separation because she's just decided to embrace herself, right? And her family can't accept that. And just that simple acceptance and visibility in the eyes of her granddaughter just meant so much to her. And I think that's one of the most powerful lessons of this story. We should just accept people who they are.
Yeah. And it also says that it's not too late to reconnect with somebody. If you had a fight in your family or if there was a misunderstanding, life's too short, really. I mean, that's one thing this pandemic has taught us, how much we miss seeing people. There you go. Hopefully this story can give you the impetus to do something, to reach out to someone. Now, the second part of our podcast is a conversation between TBNT and writers Julya Oui and Faris Saad. So listen on. So hi Julia, hi Faris, welcome
Hi.
to Two Bookers Talking.
Yeah, thanks again.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Alright, so let's warm up a little bit.
Okay.
Maybe we'll start with you, Julia, since we have just listened to 3 chapters of your yet to be published new book called
Okay.
Transma and Me. What is the book about, just in a nutshell, and what made you go from writing horror to writing something that feels very personal?
Actually, I've been wanting to write kind of like a transgender story for a long time, but I don't really know which direction to go to and how I should write it. I've written one a long time ago. It was called Secrets from the Age of a Knife, but it's about a coming of age transgender. And now that I'm at this age, I thought of something new. What if a granddaughter, a 17-year-old granddaughter, found out that she had a transgender grandmother? So this is her coming of age journey, as well as finding out what is the difference between her growing up and what the grandmother has gone through all her life and finding peace with herself. And the strangest thing was, I read this book called A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. Then it's like, oh, I'm going to write it this way, One chapter is from the granddaughter, another chapter is from the grandmother, another chapter is between the two of them, the conversation. So I started this about 3 years ago, and this is very different from my horror stories because I'm very careful with the words I use, with the sentences, the structure, because it's not like a horror story. I'm just telling you, oh, there's a ghost, there's something horrific or something violent or whatever it is. It has to be a conversation from the heart and the thoughts from a young girl and senior person. So it was a little bit of a new kind of a struggle for me, a challenge, but I managed to finish it, most of it. Now I'm just going through the editing part.
How much of the story is based on your own story?
Oh, if you can say semi-autobiographical, but some of the scenes or events that takes place was experienced by other transgenders, stories that I heard before, and I just kind of put all the stories together, what I've gone through, what I am going through, and what are my fears and what are my joys. So it's called all like an accumulation, a gathering of all these emotions.
Let's switch to Faris. When you came out as trans, you grew up in a later generation than Julia. What was your journey like? And does her story, Transma and Me, does any of it resonate with your own experiences?
Yeah, actually, my generation and Julia's generation not that far. I'm 36 years old. But actually, yeah, I read the excerpts and I was like, oh, actually a lot of it like resonates with what I went through myself, coming out to my family and stuff. But there were like also a lot of differences as well. I mean, you can't really say that everybody has the same experience, no matter what. For example, like she mentioned that it was hard to reconcile or understand who she was, and that at one point it made her suicidal. So I went through a similar thing as well, experience. But going through school, there wasn't any material for me to reference. So I did not know that I was trans. I did not know. I simply knew that I didn't belong in this body, but I didn't know that there was a way for me to actually be who I really was. So I grew up, I spent my childhood, I spent my teens like wishing that I could wake up in a different body suddenly and like have people call me by a different name and use different pronouns for me suddenly, like until later on, maybe in my early 20s. That's when like MySpace was a thing, if you can remember MySpace. Yeah. And I actually found a lot of transgender information through MySpace, through music, because I was a big fan of like Tegan and Sarah and stuff, and I would see who their top friends were and stuff, and I started clicking and getting more into this queer music hole. And then I found like people like Amos Mac and Rocco Kayatos, the spoken word artist, I think, but those were like Western references, and then there were no local references that I could relate to, but it clicked. It was like, that's me. Through like playing shows and stuff, I met Dorian, I met a lot of local trans guys, and I was like, yeah, I can totally relate. Also, like emotionally, my parents are not accepting of who I am, even now, like 7 years down the road. They do the Asian parent thing where they don't really They deny anything that exists outside of their own worldview. They don't take the time to understand it. Like, you can simply just pick up a book or ask a question or Google it, but I told them 6 years ago when I came out to my parents and I told them I was going to transition, I was like, okay, if you have any questions, like any questions at all, you can ask me anything. I'm willing to answer. But it was just basically swept aside. And then a few days ago, I had a video call with my mom. It was just never mentioned, like between then and now, never mentioned, just never brought up. Because I just shaved my head, I was on the video call and my mom was like, why are you bald? And I'm like, because the barbershops are closed. And then she was like, girls can't be bald. I was torn between answering like, okay, I told her like, that term does not apply to me. We've had this conversation. And then I was also torn between that answer, which I eventually used, and saying that what's wrong with girls being bald? Like, it's just a haircut. Like, have you not seen a bald girl? Yeah, so I know that my mom will never come around to accepting me for who I am. And then that's just how life is going to be. Like, I've read a lot of stories from like Western backgrounds. They're like, oh, cut off this toxic relationship. But for us, in our context, it's not that simple. There's so many things that are intertwined in our family dynamics that cutting off your parents isn't a thing. Like, I support my parents, like financially support them. And that I feel is my responsibility as a child to do that. That's how I was raised, but it's not that easy to break ties with family, even though they cause you so much pain.
It's so cool that you brought up the Asian perspective, because I feel like before reading Julia's story, I think it's very rare to come across the non-Western trans experience, right? So I think one of the things that people don't really know about being trans in Malaysia is how accessible is it to be trans in Malaysia? How supportive were people around you, for example, Julia, when you first decided to undergo gender-affirming surgery and stuff like that?
Well, back in the 80s, I already told my sister, the sister that I'm closest to. At that time, she told me it could be a phase. It could be something that you're going through, and just don't tell anyone about it just yet, and you'll see what happens in the next few years. From that time on, I never talked to her about it until 2002, when I decided this is the time I have to go through my gender-affirming surgery, and I told her. And she was the one who helped me talk to my parents. She didn't actually do very much. She just told my parents that I had something to tell them. I guess, like what Faris says, the Asian expectation of a child, you don't think of things like that. And if you do, people might turn around and say, oh, you've been westernized. Asians don't do that sort of thing. But of course, that's not true. But surprisingly, of all people, my dad was very supportive. He's a very stern man, a man of few words. It's quite scary when he doesn't speak. But he was the one who spoke out and said, I read about this and it's okay. I understand you do what you have to do. I was like, wow, this is not the dad I expected. It was my mom instead. Typical Asian mother, like, oh, what did I do wrong? Where did it go wrong? Is it my fault? And, blah, blah. But family-wise, I'm quite fortunate. They've all been very supportive. And now even more supportive are my nephews and nieces. They've seen me transition from an uncle to an auntie. They didn't quite understand. So I just told them, explained to them. And also, at that time, I was teaching in an art school. I just called my class, the students, and told them that I'm going to go for surgery on my birthday in July. Those days it was called gender reassignment surgery. So I wrote it down. And then I said, if you don't understand, you can ask your friends to explain, or I'll explain to you. So I guess they were kind of shocked, but they were very supportive. The students are one of my best supporters, right through and through different schools, different classes. They just came forward to tell me. They even gave me flowers on a graduation day. It was like amazing. It was such a big deal and made such a big deal out of it. So support-wise, I can say I'm very, very fortunate. I wasn't thrown out of the house. Actually, I was prepared for that, My bags were packed, and I told myself, if my parents say, out, get out of here, I would have just walked out and happily find my life in KL or somewhere else. I was prepared, but that didn't happen. I was prepared to get kicked out of my job, which I was a lecturer, graphic design lecturer, but that didn't happen. I was also prepared for the students to say, oh my God, what kind of teacher is this? That also didn't happen. So I've been quite fortunate in all those aspects.
Both you and Faris have sort of found a way to express yourselves via writing or via music, right? For you, Faris, when you started a band and then you are able to write whatever you're going through and share it with people. But we all know that there are those who are less fortunate, right? Especially in the trans community that, as you were saying, Julia, that might not have the support, that gets kicked out, that faces economic violence, not being able to retain jobs, especially in the corporate environment, because both of you are kind of in the arts. Yeah. But Faris, I was kind of curious because you have been in the corporate line, so to speak. I was just wondering, would you know of people who have gone through the inability to express themselves the way they feel? How they are outside is the same way that they feel inside, right? Do you have any such stories or anything that you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, for me and Julia, I have a similar situation where I was quite fortunate in my working experience that I had supportive bosses and an environment and stuff. And the only major issue for me was toilet, because I transitioned on the job. And then I had to continue using the female toilet. And then the people who knew me already were fine with that. For me, it doesn't really matter where I pee as long as I can pee. But they didn't want to put me in the men's toilet because then it might make the guys feel a bit uncomfortable, even though I really don't care. But then for new employees coming in, if I happen to be in the toilet and then they also went into the toilet, they were quite surprised. And then I would be like, it's okay. I can explain. I had to. So almost every time was I have to come out kind of experience. And then also, because I was a journalist, so I had to go out and interview people, and I had these contacts that I knew from before I transitioned and after I transitioned. And then when I transitioned already and I had a mustache and stuff and my voice broke, I had to reintroduce myself. I had to say oh, before I was this, now I'm this. And then a lot of them were like, oh, okay. But I guess it really doesn't matter from that aspect, because I was in journalism and it tends to be more open about stuff. But those who are working, I've heard of experience of people working in GLCs, for example, where they have to hide who they are. I know them outside as completely different people from who they are in the corporate world. Say I meet them at an event, a work-related event, and then they are completely different. The persona is completely different from outside because they're afraid of being out and losing their jobs, potentially. And you also have these experiences, oddly enough, within multinational companies as well, that have basically policies that say you cannot discriminate. But it really doesn't matter if you have these policies in place, if you have people within the company that do not recognize those policies, that have their own personal prejudices overriding, these policies. Bosses that are really homophobic or transphobic or stuff, they may not be outwardly aggressive towards you, but they may have these little microaggressions that make working life a living hell for you until you resign on your own accord. This happens all the time, and it's really, really terrible that we lose talent this way, and we put so much mental anguish on these individuals that they cannot function to a point where they suffer a lot of mental health issues and stuff, and not to mention that mental health itself is still a stigma in the workplace. You cannot say to your employers, it's hard for a lot of people to say to the employers, look, I'm depressed, I'm seeking therapy, I may need some time off work. It's still a no-go for a lot of places, unfortunately. The diversity in the Malaysian aspect here does not refer to gender identity expression and sexual orientation. It refers only to they hire people regardless of race, old or young, and religion. That's it. That's the extent of the idea of what diversity is. So this needs to change. The working culture needs to change. And even if they're not able to change the legal aspect of it immediately, that takes years and years. We need to change the working culture itself within those companies for them to be more welcoming to everyone. so that we can make use of everyone's talents and everyone can contribute as themselves. It causes a lot of anguish, like say small things. Like I was working in this job and I had a colleague who transitioned on the job. She had issues with the bathroom. She was not welcome to use the bathroom at our workplace. This is many, many, many years ago before my journalism job. And we worked the night shift. So in order for her to go to the toilet, she had to go to the petrol station across the road at night and ask to use the toilet. And unfortunately, they would give her the key to use the place. So I would go with her, like teman her, to go to the toilet. And this, it may seem like a small thing, but it's actually a big thing that affects your mental health as well. So yeah, these are things that need to change within the corporate culture itself.
You're right. You always think of the bigger stuff, right? But you don't think of all these smaller things that just makes your daily life a challenge, right? Like you're already going through life with all sorts of different stuff that you have to go through. But, something like that, having to constantly think about how do I maneuver my way around these people? How do I keep my job? How do I speak my mind and not have somebody just classify me as just one thing? Because then it becomes your entire identity, right? People just see you as a trans person. You are so much more than just gender. I mean, gender is just a construct, right? We always say this when we're talking about books and stuff like that. It's really interesting to listen to these sort of stories because you don't realize this unless you lived it.
Just to follow on from what Faris said, we don't see all these things that happen in the background. What was either of your experience like with official documentation and, just with the government in general, just being recognized for who you want to be recognized as? For example, maybe Julia, tell us what it was like just to get a new IC.
When I was in KL, I approached them to get my identification changed. At that time, they were still quite okay. I can't remember, it was early 2000. But I wanted the gender to be changed, not just the name. So the officer behind the desk told me, you have to get all these documents for us. Doctor's letter from the general hospital. You have to get, of course, from the surgeon who performed the surgery, the psychiatrist. I tell you, there was a whole bunch of documents. After going the whole round, going everywhere to get every single thing, like a wild goose chase, then the next officer behind the table told me, no, we cannot change the gender. So it was like, you should have told me in the first place. And then when I came back to Taiping, just a few years back with the IC change and all that, or new IC, so I approached them again and I asked if I could get my name changed, not even the gender. And then the officer behind the table said, no, actually, PERA is very strict. It's different for every state. PERA is so strict, your name cannot even be changed. So I was like, but anyway, she said, if you want to try, you just send in your documents and all as usual. So I did. I sent everything in. Before I know it, I got a letter and say I've been rejected. So I gave it up. I just step back and say, that's it. I'm not going to do this anymore. It is very, very depleting. You just come back home and you be thinking about it. My God, I can't change this. I can't change that. And then at this point in my life also, I really want to say, F it. I don't want it anymore. So there's always this small little fear whenever I go to the banks, whenever I go to government offices and all that, because they will check your IC. Again, they will look at the gender. I don't know why they have to look at the gender. You can just not look right. But there was some very pleasant experiences. I went to Maybank. So this guy, he was like very fast. Said, yeah, so what's the problem? What can I help you with? And all that. So I told him, oh, my card, something's wrong with my card. So he said, IC. So he looked at my IC. And then he said, Mr. Uy. Then he realized, he looked at me, he switched, he said, Miss Uy, you wait for a while, I will check and see what happened. So from that time onwards, Taiping is a very small town, so I see him most of the time when I go to the bank. So he was quite nice, he just didn't bother about the gender, he just went on. And I experienced that with a lot of different bankers in HSBC, in different banks as well. So far, people have been wonderful, except of course the government says no this, no that. because when they allow people to get away with bullying, the bullies will always think like, oh, this is my prerogative. I can do it. The government didn't say it's wrong. So I can go around bullying people, putting people down and all that. Some of the worst cases is like they just, one of them was a doctor. When I tried to get a letter from the doctor in GH, she was very approachable. She just talked to me, yes, what can I do? Then when I just told her, I'm a transgender, I need to get a letter from you, she just backed away. She's like, what are you doing here? Why did you come here? So I say, oh, the IC department told me to come here and all that. So she's like, okay, I'll just write this for you. She doesn't want to look at me. But the nurse who was helping her, she stood aside and then she told me, I know someone who is like you in my kampong. She said nice things. Like she said, you're very pretty and beautiful. So I was like, on one hand, this young doctor like, oh, no, I'm not going to even look at you. Then this probably middle-aged nurse, she's already gone through a lot. She understands. She's like, it's okay, we just get this done for you and all that. So again, you have very, very nice people and not so nice people. There will always be something like that.
Is it possible, I mean, this is just curiosity, is it possible to change your IC? Is it possible the right documentation? Like, so today memang tak boleh lah. You cannot change your gender in your IC, yeah?
As a person who is Malay and also assigned Muslim at birth,
yeah,
I would probably have to take the government to court if I wanted to do it. Yeah, it's not that easy because even though there might not be a particular law that says it is not possible, it all depends on the people who are behind the counter as well. Yeah. Like for me, I think roadblocks are always hell. Sometimes it's an experience that's like a bit like, oh, what the hell just happened? My partner and I, we were driving around Taman Tun and we were going out to the Penchala link, and then we were stopped by these police officers on like a roadblock. And then of course procedure show IC. And then the guy takes the IC and he looks at me at the thing and he looks at me and he looks at the card and he looks at me and then he's like, lelaki ke perempuan? And then I'm like, okay, here I put on my educator mode and I'm like, transgender, kan? Then he's like, macam mana tu? Tak faham. And I'm like, masa saya dilahirkan, saya cakap saya perempuan, tapi sebenarnya diorang tu silap lah, saya lelaki kan. And then he asked me he shows the IC to his colleague and then they had a bit of a chat and then they call me to step out of the car and then he looks at me and he's like, oh, misai tebal ya? And I'm like, ya. Lama jugalah nak simpan misai ni kan. Lama juga. Dia kata, macam mana nak dapat misai macam ni kan? He looks at my legs and he's like, oh, kaki pun banyak bulu lah. Macam mana nak simpan misai? and then I'm like, oh yeah. And then I told him about testosterone and stuff. He was like really intrigued. He's like, where do I get this?
I too want to have a misai.
Experiences like that lah. So I told him basically I take testosterone and then it gives me like masculizes my features and stuff. And he's like, oh, okay. And then he points to my girlfriend. He's like, girlfriend ke tu? And I'm like, yeah. He says, oh, okay. And then he gives me my IC. He says, okay, jalan. That's considered a positive police experience. Like I have a lot of negative ones as well. And it really depends on the person who happens to be there at the time because there's no particular law saying that you have to treat all equally, there's no discrimination or whatever. I think about 2 years ago, I broke my IC. I sat on it like an idiot. I broke it and I took it to the JPN to change lah. The IC picture is old IC picture before I transitioned. So then the officer was looking at me and she's like, oh, kamu lelaki ke perempuan? The same question lah. Then I explain lah, transgender, educator mode on, and then explain lah. And then the makcik was like, oh, okay. Kalau macam ni, kita kena ambil gambar baru lah sebab muka awak dah tak sama lagi dah. Then I'm like, okay, boleh kan? Boleh because I'm not happy with that picture lah. I want to put handsome pictures lah. And this is like, tapi maaf lah, saya kena tanya ni, boleh tak kamu cukur misai? Sebab and then she made up an excuse saying that, oh, sebab sistem kami tak dapat nak detect muka yang orang ni. I think she was just trying to find a middle ground where it would allow me to take a new picture but it wouldn't draw too much attention. Yeah, but she was nice about it lah.
Well, I mean, at least least like in that circumstance, they were curious enough to ask, because, they don't meet people like you and Julia every day, right? So, I mean, in a way that's as you say, it's like occasionally you get these positive kind of experiences where people are genuinely curious and they're not nasty about it, kan? Since we're talking about transitioning, right? So for you, Faris, you said that before you did all your hormone therapy and stuff, you had 6 months of psychological evaluation first. So I suppose in a way, right, for listeners out there, right, who just wants to know how, or even for a transgender person that wants to go through transitioning in this country, is it possible? How does the process go?
Depends on the medical professional that you see. There are those that are completely not open to it, and there are those who will tell you upfront and say, actually, this is not legal for me to help you with this, but I will help you because this is my job. They will tell you that upfront. Because a lot of trans guys, they simply don't want to go through the torture of having to be rejected all the time and then being shamed in public hospitals and stuff. So they go to the black market and get their hormones, and then they go on these forums and talk to other trans guys about dosages and stuff, which I would not recommend, but if it's the only way that you can do it, then that's the way you do it lah. But I wanted to see how I could do this legitimately, safely, with the help of medical professionals. So I had to see the psychiatrist for 6 months, and we talked about how I wanted to transition and stuff. And then he told me up front that says, okay, actually it's no longer recognized as a mental health condition, that you are transgender. However, in order for you to be able to go see an endocrinologist and get your testosterone, I need to issue you a letter saying that you have gender identity disorder, which is what I got from him after the evaluation and all that. I got the letter from him, went to the endocrinologist, and the endocrinologist was like, oh yeah, I've actually met a few people like you before and I can help you. And he again stated, this is not 100% legal, so I'm just going to say on paperwork that you have a condition that requires you to take testosterone, but I will not disclose the condition. It really depends on the medical professional that you see. Some may not be open to it at all, but so far my experiences, I lucked out. I lucked out meeting these particular doctors, and I've provided them as references to other trans guys as well. But you have a cough and cold and stuff, and you want to go to a clinic, okay, you want to get your medicine, you have to go through the whole anguish, anxiety-inducing thing of giving your IC and then having the nurse ask, what is this? Why is your face different from this? Why is your name different? And all that, kan? But I make it a point to put my brave face on, go into the clinic every time when I want to register, and I say, ni IC saya, tapi boleh tak letak nama Faris? And then they'll be like, okay, boleh. Usually it's like that, but it's not easy. I know a lot of guys out there who won't seek medical help for stuff simply because of this. And then there's the doctors themselves lah, which is good luck or bad luck lah, depending on who it is. Yeah.
Is there a resource of transgender-friendly medical professionals?
Yeah.
You share it around?
Yes.
Maybe you could share a little bit about what it's like being openly trans and in the public eye. Especially because, a lot of other people are watching you and they're taking cues from you. And maybe what it's like to be a role model for them. Someone that they can feel I can look at you and I can feel I can do this for myself as well.
When I think about it, that I did not get my IC changed, it was kind of a blessing to me. Because after that, I realized if I got my IC changed to the gender as a woman, I have to go stealth. Going stealth means I have to keep my background, my past and all that a secret. I cannot expose myself to anyone in case, they will come after me for whatever reasons. So when I thought of that, the past few years, I was like, thank God I didn't get the gender change. Imagine the things that I could not do. One of the things was when they had Sexuality Merdeka, the events I used to attend. One of the sessions was I went to speak out as a trans woman, and they were quite surprised. A lot of people were not even educated, or they didn't realize what transgenders were going through. So after the talk, some people came to me. Some of them thanked me for opening their eyes to all this. So it does help. After that, I've thought of myself, I'll never go stealth. I don't want to trick anyone into thinking that I'm a real... Those days, we don't use cis woman. call it biological woman. So I don't want people to know that or to be tricked into it. And then only they found out, why didn't you tell me? So I started from then on. Anyone who wants to know, you ask me, I will tell you. But of course, I won't go around announcing, hey, I'm a trans, I don't want the attention and I don't want to go stealth. So I went on live like that, and it actually helped me with my writing. So if you want to invite me or you want to not invite me because I'm a trans, that's no big deal. To me, it's like I love writing, and it's not up to you to tell me what I should write or what I should not write. Some people found out that I was trans. They wrote to me in my Facebook message, especially this young trans woman. She told me she wanted to transition. She didn't know what to do or how to tell the friends or her family. So I told her what I went through and what she could do. Then I gave her a list of people because we are under this Sexuality Merdeka group. They have a list of LGBT-friendly doctors from all over the states, all over the country. So at least there's someone we can recommend or tell them to go to. So after that, I told her also, there's another group of trans who talk about hormones. So they talk about where to get, how to get hormones, and what are the dosages. I mean, they share their own experiences. You still have to go to the doctor to be sure of what you should get for yourself. But at least there's an outlet. Because during my time, even the psychiatrists and the gynecologists didn't know what to do. I asked them, what kind of a hormone should I take? Or how much is the dosage? They didn't know. None of them knew what I should do. So I just went to the pharmacy. I bought hormones. I just tell them certain names and all that I found from the internet, and they just sell it to me. That was the best thing I could do. So I have to take matters into my hands, find a surgeon in Bangkok, and find out what they need, what to do. I've been interviewed. I even taught in Befrienders. They invited me because they wanted to know if callers were to call up about being trans. They wanted to know what to say or what to do. So I just shared with them with whatever I could. So to me, thank goodness I did not get my eyes changed. Otherwise, I would have to hide behind the gender, female, and that's it. I would have shut myself, imprisoned myself in that sense.
I mean, for you, Faris, you're in a band. Well, you were in an all-girls band, right? Then you transitioned literally whilst in this band. So how was that? How was the whole experience and your fans? How was that, being in the public eye?
Like, no choice lah. I mean, I had to be public from the very beginning. People couldn't say like, oh, well, we just decided to change our vocalist to a guy, like, because there was also the in-between phase where my voice was cracking like a teenage boy, and then I was like kind of looking in between as well. So it has become sort of cemented our journey as a band lah. We never initially set out to be a LGBT, queer band, but it just happened to be that way because of who we are in the band. And it's really great. Like, well, we do receive a lot of negative comments, especially if there are articles published about us. You're always going to have those keyboard warriors that say you're like death threats or whatever. And one time we got this message. Someone just simply told us, like, just that, like, no context or whatever. And we're like, is this a good or a bad? Like, because we have our fans shouting at us, customers all the time. And we didn't know this person. So we're like, oh, was it meant in a nice way? I don't know. We're just going to take it as a nice way. And so we replied, love you too. And so maybe because of our culture, we're not really outwardly aggressive towards others. Like, we are keyboardly aggressive towards people, but we are not like face to face. Like, so far, I touch wood no one has come up to me and said, you should just go and die. And like, it's also really good to be public, but then again, you are at risk. You have to acknowledge every show that you play in public puts you at risk. Every article that's published about you puts you at risk. Every interview that reveals who you are puts you at risk. We have to accept that from the very beginning. I actually told my bandmates we might lose our fans, or people might not want to invite us to shows anymore if I transition and stuff. We have to be prepared for that. And they're like, yeah, slumber lah, just do it, whatever, who cares, can. If some doors close, we'll find some other doors to open. probably because of who we are, we're not going to get mainstream radio play. We're not going to go to all the mainstream, whatever, awards shows or whatever kind. Anugerah this, whatever.
Oh, Anugerah Industry Music, man.
Awesome. Juara lagu,
Juara lagu. Yeah.
We're never gonna get that. Yeah, but it's okay to not want those kinds of things as well. But we get to approach people one-on-one. Like, I remember this one very heartwarming experience. We had a friend who was living with us in our studio, and he had traveled to Sabah. And where he was staying, this kampung area, this one girl came up to him and says, "Hey, you came from KL, right?" And then my friend was like, yeah. And she says, "Hey, I heard of this band from Kuala Lumpur and I really like them, Shidiam." And then my friend was like, "Oh my god, yeah, I know this band. I live with them." and then she was like, "I really like listening to their song because it makes me feel like I'm not alone." When things like this happen, it kind of reminds me, like, despite the negative stuff that we get all the time, this is what we're meant to do. This is what we're supposed to do. It gives us a sense of purpose. I mean, a lot of times because of money and whatever, you think like, oh, we should probably just give up. And then stuff like this happens and we're like, oh, we shouldn't give up. Yeah, we should continue. Yeah.
Wow. That was just amazing.
Like, when I first met you, Julia, I was like, in awe.
I suppose that's one of the greatest things is when you just live yourself as honestly as possible, and that touches people just by you living your honesty, right? Yeah. So many people look at trans people like what you guys have described, and they just see a label. They just see a kind of person, and they think that they know who you are. I think, that's probably one of the hardest things to deal with. I hope that anybody listening out there, we don't think that we're only going to reach the trans people, but we're reaching the public out there who don't know what it's like to be trans, who don't understand what it's like to be you. And we're hoping that we're able to get them to understand that you're people who have various and very diverse personalities as well. And they can probably understand that, you just want to live your life the way that you see yourself. Julia, your Transma is it going to be out soon? Is this a novel that's going to be out soon?
I hope so, because I'm still editing it. There's still some kinks I have to work out, and probably later in a few months' time, I will approach the publisher when it's done.
Okay.
How is it like right now in Malaysia? We want to bring it back down to why we're doing this show as well. Because you were talking about Sexuality Merdeka, right, in 2002.
Yeah.
And in those days, there was some real inroads that's being made to people understanding, trans issues and stuff. And of course, it was shut down. So how is it like today? What is the future of the LGBTQ community in Malaysia?
I honestly don't know. We keep on changing governments all the time. And every time the government changes, like, everyone has to start their work from scratch to talk to new people in the Jabatan Agama and whatever, kan? So, I don't know, maybe we should be in the government.
It'll be very hard to be worse than what we have right now. So
exactly. The bar has been set so low, people have extremely low expectations. Day one will be doing an excellent job. Yeah. But it really depends. Like, there's two approaches to it. There's the public approach where you through music and writing, through telling stories and sharing experiences, that we talk to the general public. And then there's also the legal aspect of it, which is a whole another song and dance. We have the Sharia court, we have the federal, and that. I don't know. Yeah. Those things may take a longer time to change, or I'm sorry to be negative, maybe certain things may never change as long as certain people are in power. And I'm talking about the patriarchal Muslim Malay men. That's as long as they are in power, things will never change. Yeah, so we need to have a super diverse government. I would say let's have a government that's at least 70% women, like in our ministers. Then I think maybe we will see some major change. So 2023, anyone?
Both of you, you want to live in Malaysia, right? Have you ever thought about living elsewhere?
Yes.
Yes.
A few times.
And yet here you are doing the good fight. Still doing it. Still
Cannot
here.
lie, Julia. Of course, we fantasize about living abroad where we can be ourselves, we can hold hand with partner, no problem, lesbian, gay, whatever. Kan? I love Malaysia. I love our people. I love who we are. Like, I love how we take care of each other. Like, look at the white flag movement. Look at how many people have helped each other. Yeah. We still are super connected, and despite the government's efforts to divide us, like, to remind us, like, oh, you are like this, you should be separate. And the systems that divide us, like, Malaysians are still like super Malaysian. Like, we love each other.
Basically, I'm a very optimistic person since I was young. And I try to look at the brighter side of things. When Sexuality Merdeka was closed down, I was a bit sad because there was a place where we all gathered. Literally, the LGBT was so strong there. We had so much fun. I just love hanging out there. And then when we look at all the bands playing, and there were talks, and there were educational, things we learned, movies. So everything was just coming together. If that were to go on, we might even be having our pride parade years later. But because they felt like we were becoming too strong, we were uniting, then they stopped it. Everything broke apart and we all went our separate ways. I actually left the country 3 times, but I never stayed on. The other strange thing about me is I trust my instincts very, very much. When my instincts tells me, don't do this, even if you don't understand it, don't do it. I will never do it. I was almost going to America, New Zealand, but the instincts tells me, don't stay, come back. I just came back. Even after all this, even in Canada, I came back. And being an optimist, I see a lot of changes. You can say they are very small, minute changes on ground level. The people, the government, the religious, and people with authority may just come down on you, suppress you, tells you LGBT equals bad. But the ground level people are changing. I've talked to people and people have been nice. People are beginning to open themselves. After my transition, my surgery, I wrote 3 articles in the Star newspaper. That was back in 2002. And the strangest thing was, my auntie told me this. One of her friends, a very elderly friend, probably in the 70s or 80s, she told my auntie, I read this article about a trans woman and how difficult it was to go through in Malaysia and all that. And then she told my auntie, I suddenly understand what it's like to be a trans from this writing. And she told my auntie like she's so inspired by this writer. So when my auntie told me, I was shocked. So all these small little things, it may be insignificant on so many levels because it's just like 1 person, 2 persons, but it helps. It really helps. I always feel ever since I never wanted to leave Malaysia anymore, that Malaysia has a very, very good opportunity to be one of the best countries in the world because we have a lot of talents. My goodness, when I think about it, we have so many good writers, so many good musicians and chefs and artists. My goodness, it's just like engineers, scientists everywhere. We only hear about them when they are overseas. Oh, this person became famous for all this. And that person either was a Malaysian or is still a Malaysian, but they left the country. I was also thinking, if I were to leave Malaysia, probably I would have made it a long time ago. But I like being here. And I always find joys in little things. I appreciate the small things that I have. In Taiping here, the good food that we have, from curry mee to laksa to wonton mee to whatever, is just round the corner. It's just like at the back of my house. There's a row of shop houses. So I tell my friend, my partner, I said, aren't we so lucky, It's like a 5-minute drive, or if you can cycle there, you tapao, you come back, you eat, and the garden is so beautiful, it's so peaceful. The birds are here, the insects are here, everything is converging here. So I'm thinking to myself, am I supposed to be so happy during the pandemic? Everyone's like suffering, no food, no money. I'm like, oh my God, here I am. I'm like so appreciative. Everything is working out so nicely, and I have time to write, and I love it because everything is just so peaceful. So like I say, being an optimist, I have a lot of hope for Malaysia. People have changed tremendously, and with the support that I've seen, they may be small and they may be negligible now, but it can turn things around just like that. So you never know. We may actually run the country someday. You never know, anything can happen.
Is that what you would like to say to the LGBTQ and the trans community, right? Like, what would you want to say to them? How to keep going, or, because you've gone through it.
Yeah. Just to tell the young LGBTs now, back during my time, I was all alone. So it took me a long time until 2002, when I was 39 years old, and then only I transitioned. It took me a long time to get there. I thought I almost didn't survive. So for the young LGBTs, whoever is going through that right now, you have every support in the world. You can crowdfund for your surgery. It's happened before. You can contact Sexuality Merdeka or anyone else for psychiatrists, LGBT-friendly doctors, and you have allies, people who support you. You can spend time talking to them. You have anyone with a phone call away. Suicide prevention, befrienders, Pink Triangle. Just don't throw the towel in, don't give up. You're not alone anymore. This is very, very true because everything is at your fingertips. And you have information. Those days, I didn't even know what hormones to take. Now, you just type in whatever. They'll tell you what to do, what to take, and what are the side effects and where to go. There are surgeons, doctors. Those days, it was difficult, but it's easy now. So just hang in there. Wherever you are, whoever you are, hang in there.
I have a lot of faith in the younger generation. I have a lot of, because I've seen how, like, for instance, shows like this, to reach out to a certain, that targets a certain demographic that actually are aware of these issues that are going on, thanks to the internet and the availability of resources and queer content in like shows on Netflix and stuff that they watch, and they're like, oh, actually these are regular everyday people. Like, I have a lot of faith in the younger generation, and maybe they are not aware of how much power they have collectively. They're able to change things. I hope that they see that they can actually make Malaysia a better place for everyone, the best place for everyone, because they have the right mindset. Right now, it may seem difficult. Like, for me, say, for people like us, if we want to start a family, it's not legally possible here for us to do that. But maybe it will change in the future. Like, when the younger generation steps up, goes into politics, things will change. Y'all out there, yes, change things.
An average Malaysian, right? What can they do right now to just make it a little bit better for people out there? Like, if they see discrimination, like, can they speak up? I mean, like, what would you like to just say to them? Before we go into what books should you read, because we're still a book podcast. We're still book nerds. What can somebody out there who's listened to this show, how can they reach out? Like, what can they do? Like, they see discrimination at the workplace or something. Just a little small call to action,
I think most Asians are afraid of confrontation. If you see someone getting bullied, I think most of us will be afraid to approach and try to calm everything down and tell the person, please don't do that. I have some friends who does that. Even in the buses and all that, if they see some women or girls which are being bullied, they'll just go up and say, stop doing that. You're not supposed to talk to girls that way. Of course, they can get into trouble. It's quite scary though. The guys can just it's none of your business, or I'm just going to punch you or something like that. So if you are afraid of confrontation, remember who you are. You don't do things that you don't feel comfortable doing. So if you are not able to step in at that time, one of the things you can do is to comfort the victim. It can be after the issue or the situation. Approach the person who is a victim and then comfort him or her, tell them that it's okay. Not everybody is like that. And I am one of your allies. I support you. If you need me to help you with whatever, I can. Some of the people actually in my Facebook group as well, they were very helpful. I can't remember which group. They were talking about the toilet issues as well. some of the trans could not go to the toilet and all. So one of these girls, I remember, she said, if you're around my area or I'm here with you, you can call me. I will go to the toilet with you and make sure you're safe. Things like that. It's the small things. So all these little things. And you can talk to people, comfort them, write to them if they've been put down or they've been threatened, just to let them know that not everyone is threatening you. We are doing our best to trying to make this place a better place. It's from the book, A Small Acts of Resistance. You resist through the smallest act, which are almost like non-existent, so that the authority cannot harm you, cannot take you to court. You boycott something. You stop supporting something which is anti-LGBT or something like that. So it is up to you and it is your choice. You don't do it because people say so. So you do it because you want to do it. And if you can, write letters, write books, write stories in support of all this and tell your side of the story as an observer. We are telling our stories which are first-hand, but you who are observing us as well, you can always tell your side of the story. And like what the two of you doing, like you guys here, this is fantastic. This is already helping a lot of people. So we should be thankful to you guys as well.
Oh. Well, I really want to go to your gig now, Faris. So I hope we can have gigs soon. Because the fact that you love Red Hot Chili Peppers, that's also, I love Red Hot Chili Peppers. So, like I was looking at your music choice, I'm like, yeah, I definitely...
Well, I'm withering at home, haven't played a gig in such a long time already. Betul lah, it's like Julia says, like, small things that you can do. You don't have to like start a political party to change things. It's small things like, using the pronouns that someone prefer. Like, simple thing like that. Like your colleague, for instance, or if you see bullying in the workplace, say something. And the fact that our culture is not a say something kind of culture, that has to change as well. And I'm really happy to see kids like Ayn stand up to like injustices and stuff. And then she's got backing of a lot of people. I mean, she's got a lot of negative flack for it as well. But the wheels start turning. They're like, so this has been going on in our schools. Like, we personally going through the school system have witnessed stuff like this ourselves, but we didn't know that that was wrong, that, it didn't click. But nowadays, like, people are thinking about stuff like that, and slowly you get to see this change in the culture where people are standing up for others. And it's really good to see that, and I hope that this continues. But you have to remember that you don't have to do big things to initiate change. Sometimes it's the small things that matter as well.
Yeah, and just to cap off the conversation, if either of you have some suggestions for further reading, further viewing, whatever you've enjoyed in the past that you think could help people to understand a little bit more about the transgender issue?
One of the latest ones, of course, is Pose. If you haven't seen Pose, it's fantastic.
Oh, yeah. I have not watched second season. I watched the first season. Yeah.
Although they are American, but the issues that we go through, they're quite similar. How we are being bullied into submission, how we are sidelined. So Pose is one of the TV series probably you should watch. And if you want to understand about a transgender kid going through the change without understanding it herself, is Mavi Andros. It's 1997. I think it's French. She's just being herself. And everybody, especially the adults, are so frightened. So you see the understanding of adulthood and the innocence of a child. She just wants to wear a dress. She wants to dance, play around. But the parents are like, oh my goodness, what is this child going to turn out to be? So Mavi Andros is a very good movie to watch. And of course the Thai one, where she was a kickboxer, beautiful boxer, 2003. So that one also you can see her transition. She's already in the limelight. She's somebody. She's a boxer. At that time she was very masculine. But she knows that she's not happy. She has to go through this. So during her transition, you see a lot of ups and downs, and she still wants to be a sportswoman in that sense. There's another issue about sports people being transgender. Of course, there are some very tragic ones which I won't recommend. it will leave you very empty and very sad and very depressed. It's just like there's so many of them. And of course, the documentary Disclosure 2020 is also quite good. It talks about trends from different people from different levels of society. If you understand transgenders, when they find themselves, their true selves, they're just so happy, they're elated, they're exhilarated that this is who I am and I'm already happy. And just imagine, because of that happiness, someone tries to take it away. Someone tries to block it because you're not allowed to be happy in that sense. I find it very weird. Like, why? Why are you trying to make people sad in that sense? The first book that helped me understand about transgenderism was Tula, Tula, by Caroline Cossey. That's the only book I could find. And I found out she was a born girl then, but someone outed her. So after someone outed her, it was terrible. It was a very bad outing. They showed the pictures when she was a boy and what school she went to. And then I think she lost her job. She was a model. Then people were supportive. Some people with the agencies and all were supportive. But people found it very weird. They call her all kinds of names and all that. You can see her in Disclosure as well, the documentary. That book has become a collector's item. Because at that time, she just sold a few copies to tell about her lifestyle, to straighten the story of her life where the media has messed it up. They even picked the wrong schoolboy to be her and things like that. So that's one of the books that helped me get by, difficult days and nights. And there's this new book called George by Alex Gino. It's a very nice little book about a transgender girl. She goes around doing what little girls should do, but everyone knows her as George. If you read this book, it's also good for discussion with families, friends, and teachers who are open-minded. And of course, there's one that I wrote for Nang magazine, the issue 3. It's semi-autobiographical as well. It's about my mother finding out about me being trans, but of course I changed the story. I call it Beautiful Mother, Beautiful Boxer. It was based on the Beautiful Boxer because according to this story, she took the mother to see the movie to explain what she was going through herself, something like that. So, and a very funny and humorous story that I wrote for Fixie was Hungry in Ipoh. I call it an Epi-curious Affair. It's something to do with food and also the son bringing back a Korean transgender girlfriend. So this is like talking about things through food.
I'm an Ipoh girl, so you have no idea how much I miss Perak at the moment. When you're talking about, belakang rumah kan, boleh makan your favourite like Ching Chong Fan and all that, I'm just like, muka I'm just sedih gila. Okay. If we can eat at the same table, there's hope.
True, yes.
How about you, Faris? You got any books that you want to recommend or shows or anything?
Okay, so this is like from the pre-internet, pre-smartphone era lah, kan? This is zaman dinosaur dulu. Okay, back then I was like questioning my identity lah. This was me in my like when I was 18, 19, 20, early 20s lah. I don't know, I hadn't decided if I wanted to be a lesbian or not. Like, it was the questioning phase lah. But like, am I really a lesbian? Am I actually a lesbian? It's like, is that kind of phase. And then this book happened lah. Middlesex. Yeah.
I've read
yeah.
Middlesex.
Yeah, so this wasn't the actual copy that I read lah. It just so happens that my partner also has this book. Yeah. So yeah, and I got a hardcover copy of it and I was reading through it and I'm like, oh my god. Even though the character is intersex in the book, like there's so many experiences that I can relate. Like having a crush on like the female classmate and stuff, and some little part of me wish that I could also suddenly, like, people would realize that I would get, like, the main character, I would be in an accident and go to the hospital and people would suddenly say, oh my god, we made a mistake, it's a boy, right? Like, you know, like, I secretly wish that would happen to me. So this is like the book that helped cement my fantasy life lah. Like, yeah, I read this book like, I don't know, 6 times and I gave it away because I tend to do that. Books that I really like, I give away to people and I'm like, you gotta fucking read this. And in terms of like TV shows back then. This is sebelum zaman streaming. Like if you all remember, there was a time where streaming didn't exist.
Yes, of course.
And then you want to watch movie, you have to go ask your friend who has super fast internet to download and burn it on a CD for you. Or you go and buy it at the DVD cheaper place. Yeah. And of all the people who recommended this show to me was my brother. Because I had come out to him and said like, I might be a lesbian. I'm not sure yet, but I might be a lesbian. And he's like, oh, have you seen the L Word? What is this show? And it's like, okay, you have to watch the L Word. Go and find it somewhere. Someone told me about this show. It's full of lesbians. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure you will like it because it's about lesbians. This is my brother, super straight, cis hetero Malay guy, right? So I go to Sungai Wang and I buy the DVD box set. And I watched it. And of course, it's like an unrealistic, super like wide expectation of what lesbian is. But that was the only thing we had back then, like our references. So I don't know if I would recommend it to people now, but if you want to have something to watch to pass the time that you know is 80% unrealistic, like enjoy that.
Yeah, the male version will be queer as folk lah kan?
Yes, that one also I bought the DVD. Because and then suddenly I started like trying to digest all these new, like all these queer films, all stuff. So it led me on a journey of like exploring queer films and series and stuff through streaming time. But one of the more recent shows that I watched was It's a Sin.
Oh yeah, I like that one.
I've not seen it yet.
It's very good.
It's really, really good. And like I can relate to a lot of what the main character was going through, so like his mom not accepting him and stuff like that. And then it also kind of gives me a little bit of hope because It's a Sin took place not so long ago, like in the late 80s, in the 80s. So imagine all the change that country went through until now, where it's okay to be gay, you can marry gay, and you can have kids as a gay couple and stuff. That was not so long ago for them. Of course, they didn't have things like religion to get in the way, but it gives us hope. It gives us hope that maybe in 20, 30 years, things will be completely different in Malaysia. Yeah. Another book that I haven't read yet is this. My partner gave it to me. Yeah, so it's basically a story of how happy people are when they transition. Like when their family acknowledges them and stuff. So I haven't started it yet. I'll let you guys know how it goes. Gender euphoria, that's what it's called. I have to say it, right? Because you can't see it yet.
Yes. This is true. We are a podcast.
I forgot. You cannot see it. Yeah.
Oh my God. Thanks so much, Julia. Thanks so much,
Yeah,
Faris.
you're welcome.
Audio Stories is made possible by Empower Malaysia with funding from the United Nations Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. Special thanks to Julya Oui and Faris Saad for letting us into their world. As for further reading, they have given you plenty. It might even be your next great read.
And as a final word, we urge you to take interest in the hidden communities that are around you. Engage with them. Simple acts of activism can begin by just asking them, tell me your story. Be curious, and most of all, be kind, because all of us can use a little kindness in this world. If you see discrimination happening around you, speak up or comfort the victim if you can. And you can of course ask your representatives or place of employment what they are doing for these communities. 2 FB pages you can go to for LGBTQ+ resources are Sexuality Merdeka and PLUHO Talk and Outreach. Also check out queerlapis.com, a local website that highlights LGBTQ+ stories. Faris writes articles for them from time to time.
This has been Audio Stories, a Two Book Nerds Talking special edition show. We are produced by Renegade Radio and supported by Alyssa Pong and Stephanie Ong. Transma and Me was read by Tina Isaacs and directed by Amsalan. And as usual, we are your friendly neighborhood book nerds, Diana Young and Hani Ahmad.
For more details on the work that Empower Malaysia do, you can follow them on Instagram at MyEmpower, Twitter at Empower Malaysia, or go to their website at empowermalaysia.org. To read the audio story in a written form, you can also check it out at feminist.my.
We leave you with a quote from Gina Rosiro. All of us are put in boxes by our family, by our religion, by our society, our moment in history, even our own bodies. Some people have the courage to break free.
Stay well, everyone, and happy reading.